living in the moment, and the moment is the future.
With Pam and John. This SPEDTalk.
Welcome to SPED Talk with Pam
and John,
also known as The Calm.
before the storm.
Our purpose is to elevate the conversation and amplify special education resources.
And our why is all about the kids. You know, Pam, there are so many organizations and people around Texas who are just making it happen for kids with disabilities.
So let's make this a platform to celebrate their efforts, because special education is about making the impossible possible. Hi, today on this episode of SPED Talk, we're going to answer the question, what is so special about special education? The last few years, that question has been floating around the state and probably across the United States. What makes special education different than general education?
Well, Pam, I'll tell you what, I think that's a question a lot of people are asking. And I think some of us feel like, what makes special education special are the people. But, I think that's something, we've got someone today, I think, that can elaborate on that with us. Who's in the room, Pam?
Well, who's in the room with us today is Cody Martin from ESC Region 14, Abilene. Hi, Cody. You want to tell our listeners about yourself?
Yes, well, it's great to be here today. I think it's an honor to do the work we're doing across the state and to meet all the great educators across the state and see what they're doing that's working well for students in special ed. And I had a great opportunity, or have great opportunities almost every week to see that work. And I'm glad to be here today to share that with y'all, because I think that needs to be out there.
We're excited, Cody. So for our listeners that don't know, Cody's a liaison with us. Pam and I are both special ed liaisons, and we've talked a little bit about that on our show. And it's something we continue to circle back to because, to be honest, across Texas, it's a new thing. It's a new position. It's been around for a couple of years. And really, there are a lot of people that still are not familiar with the role of special ed liaison. And so we're very blessed to have Cody with us today. And Cody is out there doing that work kind of in Region 14, similar to the work Pam and I are doing. We all come to this role, this job, this work from our own, areas of specialty and backgrounds and our own twists. And, I know it's really, I think our group has been inspired at times, Cody, with some of the stories you've shared with us about your background in counseling, your time as a campus administrator, and really this journey we've been on.
Right. And I think it's great to always go back to really our focus as liaisons, the connector of resources across the state of Texas to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. And although we may not be the one with the answers when we go out there, but we are the ones that are connecting with those districts, and hopefully they will reach out to us so we can help bridge that gap, not only with our region, but across the state with each other. That's what's so awesome about this work and being in here with y'all, because we're only 3 of around 28 of us out there.
That's right.
And I think our work is so important that we come back to Austin together and we share those amazing stories that are going on in each of our regions.
And one thing I remember and why I wanted you on SPED Talk is that we have, when we come to Austin, we have what we call our check-ins. And so during check-in time, Cody was sharing a story about an experience he had at one of the rural schools in his district. And I thought at that time, that's what makes special education special. Would you like to share that story with us?
Yes, because that was an amazing story. I was not working really with the district, but a couple of our consultants in the special ed department at Region 14 had connected with this school district, and they were dealing with a student that was nonverbal and had limited mobility. And so they were trying to find a way to work with him, and they had tried several ways to get him to be able to communicate at school. And his parents were reaching out to the school as well to help them, because they felt like the parents came to the school and said, if we can just find something, they didn't even know what it could be, but asking us to, if we didn't have it, to try to find it across the state, something that they could try. And that's what these consultants had done. They had connected with Region 4, and I believe it was called an eye gaze or an eye eagle is what they call it. It is a screen that you put on a computer screen. And y'all probably may know more about it than I do. But it's how you can work way of communicating or work the computer only with your eyes because you can't work it with your hands or any other way.
Yeah, the eyes have to lock in on it.
Yes.
And then when they do, it's like you
That's
can
correct.
see that connection's been made, because then the cursor or the piece starts moving and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a connection there. Yeah.
Right. And so they were actually, the consultants were working with it in the back of our office area. And they actually sat me down and they said, here, try this. And I said, and I had doubt in my mind, like a lot of times I'm guilty of, or that we're all guilty of doubting that this is going to work.
Yeah.
And so they sat me down and I locked into the movement of the ball, or you can even change it to a character, a cartoon character. And they use that to find interest for little kids, because sometimes a ball or a square is not interesting, but they'll lock into a cartoon character that they like, that they've seen. So they just use the ball, and I did lock in it with my eyes and follow it for about, I want to say it's not more than 15 to 30 seconds, if that. And I was amazed that it made connection with my eyes, and I was able to start moving around the cursor with my eyes on the computer. And I actually did not speak while I did it, and formed a sentence to communicate with the other consultants.
That is so powerful, Cody.
It was pretty cool to go through it yourself to understand what the student is going through.
Yeah, it reminds me of Stephanie's project with the See Me, Know Me, Be Me, and how it's really about how can you get into the space of that child and understand their experience, right? And so,
And that's what we have learned as liaisons, as y'all know, is that we have to go all the way down to the child's level or the student's level to really understand what they're going through. And I had that moment as a liaison of really understanding possibly what that child was going through.
Yeah.
Trying to connect with that. So I thought that was an awesome feeling before. And as I did it, before I wasn't even scheduled to go to the school district with them, but they invited me to go to see this hopefully work for this student. So I went out and I took advantage of that pretty quick.
Absolutely.
And so it was the next day that we went out to the campus, and it was I'm glad you brought that up, because it was a small rural school. And we got the equipment that we needed to work with the student. And so we took it into the campus, into a small room, sort of like what we're in today. And at first, there were a lot of people there excited about what was about to happen. And so the possibilities.
Yeah.
So just from the service center, there were 2 consultants, 3, including myself as liaison, sort of getting the equipment set up. And then the diagnostician came in, and then another school employee, maybe a principal, and then a teacher. So there were several of us in this small room. Getting excited, hooking this equipment up before the student came in. And then the teacher brought in the student, and he was very limited in his mobility. He was in a wheelchair. And then he could barely hold his head up to even sort of look. But not only were we excited in the room, but the student's face, even though he was not knowing any of us, he connected with us immediately.
Wow.
And excitement in his face was incredible.
Yeah.
So, of course, liaison, helping out as much as I can, but feeling that excitement, just hoping. At first, it was more hoping and wishing that it was would work for this student, because I was not 100%.
Yeah.
And as a liaison, I go back and say, I should go in there 100% that this is going to work.
Exactly.
You got to believe.
You've got to believe. And that's what we all need to do across the state, is believe in what we're doing and believe what we're bringing to these students will work to find a way. And so the teacher brought the student in, and then a knock on the door, the mother came as well. So we're getting all this set up, and they get the student over there to the screen, and they are having to hopefully help him with his, just to get him to focus on the screen, because he was looking around and still smiling at all of us in the room. And the mother, exactly, because she finally said, I think he's just so excited.
Kind of overstimulated.
Overstimulated,
Yeah.
exactly, in the room. And so she said, I'm going to step out because I think he'll focus more. Well, when the mother stepped out, since there were still about 8 of us in the room, I stepped out as well.
Yeah.
Because I really wasn't needed in that room. The consultants who had gotten the equipment and knew the student as well, they were the main ones in there, of course, with the student and with his teacher. So I went out into the hall and was visiting with the mom, and that was a powerful event out there as a liaison as well, because connecting with that parent.
Yeah.
And she thanked me that she was so thankful that that school took the time to reach out to the service center, to Region 14, and then Region 14 had taken the time to go across the state to Houston.
Yeah, to
that
Region
area,
4.
to Region
Yeah.
4, to connect with them to see what type of equipment they had.
That's right.
To bring it in. And so that to me was powerful as a liaison there, to know that how appreciative that mom was for that. And she told me there too, that she said, if we can only find a way from my son to communicate, I think it's going to change his life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we were waiting out there, and about the time she said that, one of our consultants who was working out there let out the loudest scream of joy you could possibly hear.
Wow.
And so that mom sort of jerked a little bit, jumped, and wondered, what's that? And I said, something great has happened in that room, because I knew that consultant and know that she gets very excited when something powerful happens or something that's going to change and be positive for a student. So we opened the door to go back into the room, and that's when they told that mom that child had locked into that and was moving it. And if you could almost feel or see the doubt with the mom until she got over to the screen, and then she could see that he was working that with his eyes.
Amazing.
Yeah. And to start off with, he was mainly working, they had brought in, going back to like a cartoon character, because they had finally realized he liked dinosaurs. And so they changed that cursor to a dinosaur. And that's when he really locked into that screen and was able to move it. And it was just, for that day, it was a huge step, but we were taking little steps to make it better.
Yes.
And then, of course, realizing what he was doing, we sort of let him do it a little bit and then let him rest, of course, also as well, because we wanted him to know what he was capable of doing. And so from then on, I think he is great things are going to happen.
Yeah.
He's going to find ways to communicate and learn and be a part of everything on that campus he can be a part of.
Yeah, to be able to give a child that doesn't have a voice, really give them a voice,
Right.
and enable them to communicate. And
Right.
that example that you use as far as connecting with 14 with 4, and a family and a school with 2 service centers, and that is really the pinnacle of what we do. That is like the beauty of ESCs, right, are that they can provide extended services. They can empower these regional schools to do more for schools. And they have been known to collaborate and cooperate, but at the degree to which we can do so now with our liaisons throughout the state, continuing to connect resources and service centers in areas of specialty, all the way down to the classroom level to the student. That's such a great example. And I mean, that's really why we do this, is because we want to have an impact in a child's life.
Right.
So that is so cool that you got to be there and experience it.
Yes.
That's really powerful.
So Cody, from a person who's a non-special ed person, at that moment, what did you think? What did you feel?
I felt that I went in sort of disappointed in myself, that I doubted it at first, but I left from doubt to excitement and know that anything's possible. Anything's possible. And anything's possible. One thing I like about this job is that connecting with others. I don't think that it's a gap we're connecting. I think it's just sharing those stories and sharing those ways we can connect to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. So what I learned from that day is that anything's possible. Anything's possible for anybody.
I agree.
Yeah.
And possibility. Well, we had discussion earlier today, and we had to give one word that would describe special education. And my word was possibilities.
Right. And I would just like to share too, I go back to the excitement I felt for that student and that mother was as much, I'm a big sports person. and my kids play sports. And I felt the same excitement that I feel that my son won a ball game as much, because I think that was winning a ball game for that student.
That was a huge win,
Huge win.
victory, a
Huge
huge
victory.
accomplishment. That's
And we
right.
need to learn how to celebrate those huge accomplishments, because for that child, that was a big accomplishment.
Yeah.
And we need to learn anything that any student grows in, even growth is a huge accomplishment.
Yeah.
Anything we can get them to move forward and to better themselves is going to make them better as well.
Right.
So building on those accomplishments to improve those outcomes for all students, no matter who the student is huge. Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes we're looking for the big win.
Right.
In reality, we have to have small wins to get
To get there.
Yeah.
To get there.
Exactly.
And it takes time.
Yeah.
Sometimes to get those small wins.
Yeah, and
Right.
we have to be willing to look for them, right?
Exactly.
We have to have our
Yes.
eyes open to them.
Right.
And I think a lot of times, depending on what our role is in the system,
Mm-hmm.
we don't get to be part of those wins, right? Because
Right.
I'm a school counselor and I'm over here doing this piece, and I don't get to go out with a group that works with this kid in the life skills classroom on that little accomplishment they made. Or I'm the campus administrator and I'm putting out fires and solving problems and dealing with discipline and everything else. And so that perspective that you offered really is like, wow, to have a chance to celebrate with that parent, with that child.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that a lot of times our educators, they don't know, or they don't have the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to really get to that level where they get to celebrate those little wins with their
Yeah.
kids.
And to also realize not to make it so little, because like you said a while ago, it was a big win
Yeah.
for this student. So just remembering that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is a big win.
It is a big win.
Yeah. To give a person a voice or a tool to communicate,
Yes.
that's huge.
Huge.
It's very huge,
Right.
because he doesn't have to sit there and let others speak for him.
Yeah,
He can speak for himself.
exactly.
And also, for students who are nonverbal, we
Mhm.
make some assumptions about their intellect,
Sure.
Mhm.
which may not be true.
That's right.
Right.
And now he has an opportunity
Mhm.
to share what he knows and what he's learned.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And also remember, there could be days of setback as well.
Right.
There could be days, but we all have those.
Yeah.
But to continue to move forward and to continue to help him in whatever, or to help others in whatever they need is
Yeah.
important as well. To always celebrate those victories, and also knowing when you have those victories, sometimes there are some setbacks, but to continue to move forward and don't just focus on those setbacks, focus on those small victories
Yeah. Yeah.
to move forward.
Yeah. And potentially unleash a strength, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe
Right.
there are strengths that student specifically has never been able to share with his mother or his teachers, or with
Mhm.
that now with communication can actually express some of those strengths.
Right.
So I think that's so important. I think when we talk about what is so special about special ed, I mean, what really does come down to the adults that are implementing these special ed departments, and are they making it special? And is it something beyond the general curriculum that bridges that general curriculum? Does it take that child with their unique needs and strengths, right? And does it connect them
Mhm.
as close as we can get to, that experience that other kids are having, whether
Right.
it is just being able to express themselves.
Right. And it didn't matter too, going back to the people in the room. We didn't go around and say, you're part of the special ed
Yeah.
component, you're the
Yeah.
principal, everybody was focused on just doing what's best for that student. And that's something we have to realize too, is we're all in this,
Right.
whether we come from the general ed background or the special ed background or administration or counseling, if we all work together, great, awesome things will
Anything's
happen
possible.
every day. Anything
Yeah.
is possible. Anything's possible.
Yeah, you just described really like the climate we want in our ARD meetings.
Mm-hmm.
You literally, by doing that right there, you said, we have the principal, we have the teacher. It wasn't about who's gen ed, SPED, admin. I mean, we were all around this table together, we were all around this child trying to figure out how to help that child and get that child what he needed. And, really that's so indicative of what we're doing around ARD committees every day, and really reminding people that, it's not about funding, and it's not about classrooms, and it's about that child that's at the
Right.
center of that
Right.
conversation. That's what's so special about special ed is we're able to really individualize
Yes.
and plan to impact an outcome of one child at a time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I think we're getting ready to close this up.
Is that a wrap?
I think it's a wrap.
Well, awesome, Cody.
Cody.
Well, I
Thank
appreciate
you.
y'all having me here today.
This was-
Great things are happening, I know, across our state.
Yeah.
And it's great to come and share stories like this with SPEDTalk or with y'all as well as liaisons. So
Yeah.
great things are happening out there. We just got to keep our eyes open and see what the great things are, and also know that this, like we talked about, it's a team approach. And if we're all focused on what's best for kids, students,
Yeah.
we're going to do great things.
Yeah,
every
and
day.
keep elevating those stories and letting people know the wins, because we have
Right.
to share the good stuff
Right.
and not get lost in all the struggles we have out there. There's plenty of barriers and constraints. We need to elevate these stories, these successes, these wins. And Cody, thank
Yeah.
you for coming and visiting with us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Thank you, Cody.
Well, if I get to start, then here we go. This is how we're going to do it, Pam.
All right, John, let's roll.
All right. Well, hey, we're sitting back down at the round table, and we are with Dr. Coral Wilkens from ESC Region 10. She's another one of our liaison colleagues, and she's here to talk to us a little bit about what she thinks is so special about special education.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. You can
Yeah.
call me Coral, though. You know me.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Coral.
All righty. So what do you want to know?
One thing we had started with Cody was really kind of addressing that question: what is special about special education? The last few years, we've been hearing it, and people have been asking the question, and more satirically than honestly.
Yeah.
And then, we know there's stories.
Right.
We know there's good work being done in the area of special education. We know there are exceptional teachers, but unfortunately, those stories really don't get shared too often. If you think about, what we see on the news sometime, the young man who has his own snow cone truck, wonderful story, but what about that person, a young person you don't see on the news, or the teacher behind that student and the parents who are supporting that student,
Right.
Who haven't given up and who goes in every day as special educators and really work for the benefit of students with disabilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really the goal that we on SPEDTalk are continuously trying to do, is elevate those stories, really capture, the experience that not just the kids are having, but the educators are, having out there in the field, and tie it to the classroom, and really be able to, just talk about examples of students being successful and thriving. And I mean, we get into that conversation so often about what's so special about special education. And I think it's easy to get off in the weeds, and you have people that, whether you are, whether you lean one way or you lean the other, you can have examples or non-examples of that. But I really think, it really is about the adults in that child's life. What are they doing that makes it special?
Right. And special ed is kind of cool. I was in a couple districts this year, and they made me rethink a couple things. And we are designers of learning.
Yes.
Think about that.
I love that.
And, we have the regular curriculum that every student has to have. There's access to the general curriculum, right? But as special educators, we get to be innovative. We don't have to follow the exact scope and sequence. We don't have to follow the exact guideline, because we have two jobs. Our job is getting them access to that general curriculum, but also closing the gap.
Yes.
And sometimes I think we get a bad rap, because I think they think, oh, well, special ed's still failing. But we're really not.
Right.
When you start looking at the growth of kids, instead of failing, we're actually growing. We're growing students. So while Johnny or Susie may not get commended on the STAR test, when we're looking at their growth opportunities and how much they've grown through their IEP or through the things that we're teaching them, we get to see who those kiddos really are. And I think about, I'll just give a little example of my life, but I can share other teachers as well. I started as an Algebra 1 teacher when I came to Texas. I'm from another state. And when I was teaching Algebra 1, the kiddos were coming into my room, and I was reading FIEs, and they said 4th grade level, 6th grade level, and this is 9th grade. And so I thought, well, okay, what do I need to do? Because this was my first year teaching Algebra 1. I knew how to teach it, but I hadn't taught it before. So I grabbed every book that I could. I looked at the scope and sequence. I said, okay, these guys are in 4th grade level. They have to be here. This is the gap I have to close. How am I going to attack this?
Yeah.
And so I really did. And I had some really great paras that helped as well. And we operationalized together in that room. I had a great administrator who truly bought into co-teaching.
Yeah.
And so his plan was, not only are you going to teach Algebra 1 as a resource teacher, but I need you to co-teach with Mrs. such and such, and her and I together really worked well. And boy, I'll tell you what, when you think you know everything, you don't realize it until you've gotten to collaborate with your colleague who's the expert in that area.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's
And
powerful.
I aced algebra, man. I took calculus in college. I was going to school for something totally different at one point. And I thought, wow, okay, my poor students I got to catch them up. I don't know what I'm doing.
Wow.
So her and I really collaborated. We never taught together in my resource classes,
Yeah.
but my resource classes benefited because her and I collaborated.
Right.
Right.
And so we saw kids meeting their STAR scores or meeting growth measure, because
Yeah.
even then we factored our own growth in. I think it's cool that the state's doing that now,
Yeah.
but we factored our own in and we saw growth in students.
Yeah.
And even 2 of my students did so well that we had to put them in a general ed class,
Yeah.
and they didn't want to leave me, which was so precious. But we said, look, you guys are ready. And they were excited because, the story of special ed is that you usually don't exit. They exited the math class. They passed Algebra 1
Yeah.
and went to geometry with a para in the classroom as opposed to having to be in that resource class.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and I could get into the nitty gritty of all the cool things that we did, but just the fact that we partnered, just the fact that I had an administrator who said, you can do this, Coral, go for it, rock it. And I did. My students were successful, and they knew that in our class they were safe, and they knew if they couldn't get it, we would get it and we'd figure it out together. So
Yeah, there's a lot of points you could draw
Right.
out of that. I mean, one is having, buy-in and support from admin that they get it, right? And that they want to see that collaboration, and really you're coming together around the needs of a child or
Right.
children. And then from that, you have really, in some ways, you've increased the expectations of what was possible for those kids. And so I think that admin and culture and high expectations, and it's interesting, all of those were part of that example, and those are still part of the conversation we're having today. And we talk about what's special about special ed. Well, I mean, it really comes down to the adults, the administrators, the teachers collaborating or not, and really designing, like you said, these experiences for kids that are special. They are unique to each of these children.
They
And so
really
that's
are.
a
Right.
wonderful example.
And I think, some of the challenge that we're seeing is, especially with the co-teaching model, is the general education teachers working along with the special education teachers, each one finding their own place
Yeah.
right.
in this quote unquote marriage that
Right.
maybe a marriage of convenient or convenience that, that one may be more reluctant to partner.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's bridging that gap. So it becomes about the kids and,
Yeah.
and figuring out how do we work together to make this happen for all students.
Well, if I can,
Go ahead.
I think one of the things that our administrator did was he was very particular in, literally, he said, pick your partner. And I was brand new to the school. Even I had no idea. But I knew this one person and I knew this one person, and not really well, but he gave us permission to be vulnerable. And so we could be vulnerable with one another. And both of them had completely different teaching styles. I say both because I was an Algebra 1 teacher and a biology teacher. And biology was not my area of content. However, between the biology teacher and I, we actually were able to do a lot. And what was even more phenomenal was when there was a substitute necessary. That substitute took my role and I taught the class. I was that skilled in it by the time we were done.
Yes.
The other thing was, and I think this is the biggest struggle of all, is scheduling for the professional time where we could collaborate as far as
Absolutely.
planning and just as far as like getting in that class. Because I'll tell you, we looked only that year at 9th grade. We didn't try to do it all at once.
Yeah.
The other piece was there was no way I was going to have conference time with both of those teachers. They didn't have conference at the same time.
Right.
And I didn't have conference at the same time. So
Right.
what we did is we planned 2 weeks at a time. Now that seems like a lot, but it's not. And if we had to tweak it, we would call each other and say, hey, or run down the hall. We weren't that far away.
Yeah.
But there were days, so week 1, I would collaborate with Algebra 1. Week 2, I would collaborate with biology.
Yes.
And so then my conference times and my prep times were really built around designing those pieces there.
Yeah.
And so, and then it really informed my practice as the special ed teacher in the resource classroom, because I really was the specialist in the accommodations, the modifications, and closing that gap. What I wasn't the specialist in was both of those content areas.
Right.
So that grew that. The other piece was those 2 teachers grew also in accommodation. And we did some really neat things like, I'll use biology for an example. When we had labs, some of our labs in that classroom, we had 4 or 5 students who had difficulty reading,
Mm-hmm.
who had difficulty just staying on task, and who needed a facilitator to ask questions, not the person that necessarily said do this next, but would ask questions. And so I would facilitate a couple different lab groups while the gen ed teacher moved around with the other 2. We strategically placed them so that I was between 2 tables.
Okay.
So I was with group A and group B.
Yeah.
They were not all special ed students, but
Mhm.
I was able to help facilitate both of them to help keep them on task. Our scores were unbelievable. And this wasn't just mine. The English 1 teacher, she had the same results. Our social studies teacher had the same results. And so one other piece that was so powerful in this is that he also said, we're going to give you 4 paras. So we had a para per content area. So if you were a science para or you were a math para, you came and worked directly with me. And the same thing happened with ELAR, and the same thing happened with social studies. So we all had a para. And then when there was tutorial time, those 4 paras had been in so much of the instruction, we paid them extra to help with tutorials.
Okay.
And so not just the 4 of us, there was actually 3 of us because we had more than one, but the 4 paras were also available.
Yeah.
And so our kids had the support that every other kid in the school had,
Yeah.
but from the people who knew how to modify and accommodate for
Right.
them. And really, our principal said, make it happen. We as a team made it happen,
Mhm.
but we just got permission is really what it was. And so it was pretty fantastic. And it took the special ed director too. I mean, she had to say, yeah, I'll pay for those paras to have
Sure.
extra duty time.
Yeah.
And they did. And it was only 2 days a week. They weren't there every day.
Right.
But
Yeah.
and man, if I can redo that model myself, in my real world, if I could be a principal, I'd take it on because it was that cool. So, and it's really something that can still be done today.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, examples of co-teach that really work are awesome because what you see is it's not always, we think so much about what is the impact on the child, right?
Right.
What is the instructional impact for that child? But really, I think even beyond that is what is the impact on that culture? When you think about an inclusive culture, and we think about special ed not being a place, but, provision of services that follow a child, it really does. I think it's synonymous with, if adults in an environment can come into and out of different settings, can cohabitate, can work collaboratively, that's an inclusive environment. It's not about where kids sit in class. And so that's a wonderful example.
Yeah.
And I like when you said it was about we are designers of learners,
Yes. We
And-
were.
which is really profound
Yeah.
because we think about, teaching. When the joke is, well, what do you teach? Well, I teach history. I teach English.
Yeah. No, you teach children.
You teach children.
We teach children.
And so if you think
Yeah.
about moving from that to now I'm going to move to be a designer,
Mhm.
where I'm really looking at the learner and what the learner needs, and what do I have in my toolbox, or what do I need to add to my toolbox, so I'm able to create, the environment that will allow that learner to actually learn.
Yeah.
Well, I had a student. So he came into me in 9th grade at the 4th grade level, and sweet young man. I mean, just the kindest, happiest kid you ever met. And he just seriously wanted to be a welder on an oil rig. That was what he wanted to do. And so I said, man, then you got to pass my class. And he was like, what? What do you mean I have to pass your class? I said, you got to pass my class. And I said, in order to get what you needed. And this was just before we changed to our endorsement plan, but he had to pass Algebra 1. So we spent the first year together in my resource class. And because it was a resource class, we were able to get his transcript so that he had 4 years of math. The next year, he took it in the co-teach class. He had never, ever been in a general ed math class since he was in 2nd grade.
Yeah.
And so he took that class and he passed it.
Yeah.
And then his junior year, he took geometry and he passed it.
Yeah.
So, and y'all, this is my favorite part of the story. So his senior year, I was gone from the district by then. And his senior year, they said to him, they said, well, son, I'm really sorry, but your math models class, we don't have co-teach math models. They had agenda math models. We don't have a co-teach. He said, so you're going to have to go back to resource. Y'all, he said, heck no. That wasn't the words he used. He goes, I'm smart. And he said, I don't need that anymore. And his aunt called me, and I just started to cry because I thought that's the ticket. That's what we want to do.
Is kids that are self-determined and believe in their abilities and can overcome.
And so they called. They said, "Are you coming to graduation?" I said, "I won't miss it. I will not miss it." I got a ticket. We got to sit with his family, and he went to be a welder. So and but I was just so proud of that moment because we often think, "Oh, you poor baby." You hear those words, "You poor baby," especially.
It's too hard for him, and we shouldn't make it so hard.
And this kid came in at his 4th grade level. He just took algebra twice, but I just called myself the prerequisite to algebra 1 because that first year really. Thank God for resiliency. I was learning that year myself because that was my first year. I didn't really know completely exactly what algebra 1 should look like for the general ed learner.
Right.
And as I co-taught, I was thinking, we got to pick up our game, and we did. We were able to, but I got to do some other cool things in that room because I took elementary strategies. So I scaffolded that room. Yeah. And I had a number line, the 100 days of school. We literally had a number line on that wall, and we started with 0.01 until we got to 100 days, and that 100th day was 1.0. And so as we did that, then we learned, what do the fractions look like? What do the decimals look like? How do you say 100th? And there were days kids would walk in the room and I'd hand a Post-it notes. I want you to find 1/4. I want you to find a quarter. I want you to find 0.25, and I want you to put it in the right spot. And they would come in and they'd have to put it up on the wall. Yeah. And then we had a daily function. And so we had a pattern because most of my students didn't know patterns. Right. They still didn't know their patterns. So we're like, okay, well, we're going to learn the patterns. Yeah. And we used geometric figures that prepped them for the next year. I had a calendar just like you had in elementary school. What's our pattern today? But then we had our function. And so every day they went and graphed that function, and they had a morning warm up. We would go over that. I actually spent half the period on the warm up because that had to be the gap closure. Yeah. And so my favorite part was when we got down to testing, and the end of year testing, and you're sitting there in the state accountability tests, and you're watching those students take the test. You have to clear everything off the wall, and to watch them look up to where the anchor charts were. Yeah,
that it works.
It worked.
That is proof.
And they were successful. Yes. They were so proud of themselves. And my administrator said, I don't know how you did it. And I said, you know what? All I did was said, you can do it, and I'll do it with you.
And you believed that they could.
I believed that they could. Yeah.
Yeah, those beliefs,
cool.
right? I think our beliefs, our adult beliefs, really are really the deciding factor. Because if I
Right.
believe something is going to happen, I'm going to ensure it does. And not only that, it literally happens because that's kind of the nature of our behavior.
Right.
But if we think that it won't, then that is a self-fulfilling prophecy as well.
Right. Right. Well, you know what? I appreciate that you said the self-fulfilling prophecy because I had just moved to Texas, so I was super new. I didn't know anything. I didn't know where I was.
Yeah.
And one of my students came in and said, first time in, and his disability was emotional disturbance.
Mhm.
And he was highly gifted. That was pretty recognizable right away, but
Yeah.
he didn't think he was.
Right.
And he said to me, so Miss, am I going to make it? And I said, what do you mean? I don't understand. And he said, well, am I going to make it? And I said, what do you mean? And literally, I had no idea. He said,
Yeah.
well, you know. And I said, honey, I don't know. Just tell me. And his response was, well, you know, my family doesn't do very well. I said, well, I don't know your family. That's what I said because I didn't. I said, so I think you'll make it. And he said, well, what if I don't do well? And I said, it doesn't matter. I said, we'll do this together. I'll help you get there.
Yeah.
And we made such a connection. What was so cool is one day he came into my class, totally nothing to do with special ed, but we had built that relationship because as a special educator, you get to be pretty intimate with the kids
Sure.
because you get to really know their needs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And he came in and he brought his guitar and he's like, do you like guitar, miss? I said, yeah. And he picked it up and he pulled it. I said, here, let me play once. And he's like, no way.
Yeah.
So we played guitar together and he's like, Dad, you got to hear this.
That is so cool.
He graduated. He works for his dad's business today. I mean, has a family, but he didn't think he was going to make it because, you know. And so I think as educators, sometimes we think, oh, no, they can't. Or, oh, that's
we want
that
to protect them from
family.
failure. We want
know,
to,
but- And we worry about a kid because of a disability.
Yeah, what they can't do. We're
Yeah.
like worried about what they're not going to be able to do instead of really focused on what's possible. What could they
Right.
possibly do?
And those are all, I mean, think about all the things we've talked about. Those are success stories. I mean, the percentage of passing, first of all, was not about Coral. It really was about the team of people that believed in the kids.
Oh, yeah.
And because I can say it was all me, in no way. But when we
don't say that.
but when we are special educators looking to help students, it's a us moment.
It's an us.
Yeah.
And it's general ed, it's special ed, it's
yeah.
the families. If the families aren't there, it's still the kid.
Yeah.
It's
It's the
the
admin, it's the
relationship.
culture.
It's
Yeah.
everything. And one person can make the difference, but special ed is so much more than this thing that, you know, well, these poor kids are special ed. It's not the perfect intervention. And I'm going to tell you, there is no magic. The magic is about believing, and the magic is about really trying hard with those kids. And it's about having expectations that they can. And if you've got that down, they can do anything.
Anything's possible.
You know.
Yeah, you said earlier something that I think stood out, and to me, it jumped out to me. And you said this wasn't even about special ed. I mean, it was just, you know, we built that relationship, but the back of that was really you had a condition there, and you said, but in special ed,
Right.
that's kind of what we do is we really get to know those kids because we tend to have extended opportunities to do so. A lot of times those are our kids for multiple years.
Yes.
We might have, you know, and so we might spend multiple periods with them. And so it's not that one, you know, oh, but in gen ed you don't. Well, yes, sure, they do too as well sometimes in some instances. But I think that is another example of what makes special ed so special, and the fact that really and truly education, really and truly learning, anything, it always has to do with a significant relationship.
Yeah.
It's like, and so that's a wonderful example.
Say, Coral, as a former special ed director.
Yes. I've
Yes,
done that.
you've done that. Yes, you have.
In my world.
What would you say to a teacher, a new teacher going into the field of special education?
You mean just like what they should expect, or what are you thinking?
It's, I guess, what they should expect, because, like you said, it's more than you have your text,
Right.
you have your curriculum,
Right.
you have to make sense of it, but you're sitting, you know, your first day on the job may be kids with all different abilities.
Right.
you're assigned to teach, let's say it's English 1.
Mhm.
You might have some students who didn't pass English 1,
Right.
and you're like, say, let's say a resource teacher.
Yeah.
Well, I would
Yeah.
say, number one, get to know your kids. Spend that time. You are going to be inundated with compliance, with law, with legal, and always stay close to that. That's if you don't and veer away from that, you're going to struggle. But you've got directors and people who are going to work with you on that. And so just follow what they're telling you. But when it comes to the kids, it's about knowing them. If you know those kids and you believe in them and you partner with them to say, I can get you here because we're going to get there together. That's the key. And go specialize. Go specialize in your field. Figure out what you need to do. There are so many resources out there. And so you start your year, and I'm going to tell you, I always tell people this, your first year is survival. It happens to you.
Oh, yeah.
And the next year you think, oh my goodness, okay.
I got to a year.
I made it, and then you think about it and go, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
Because that's when you get to do some
Exactly.
tweaks in your design. That's your really true design year. Your first year is a prototype, honestly.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
That second year is that design year where you're tweaking, you're changing things. And then your third year, you can go back and look at that first year and think, wow, I was not so good. But I remember those days.
Exactly.
I think we
So
all
do
do.
I.
But honestly, though, and it's constantly learning, and it's
Yeah.
constantly being willing to step outside that box.
Yeah.
You are going to have days where here's the teaks, here's your scope and sequence. You've got to do it this way. You've got to be on this path, and instinctively you're thinking,
Yeah.
this is not working.
Right.
Go with that. Just
Follow
go
your
with
instinct
that.
and yeah.
Because there are days when you're going to get outside that box and think, wow. And I mean, I was a teacher of kids with behavior. And so I had kids who had imaginary people in their lives. And one of the ways to just help them was to talk to their imaginary people.
Yeah,
We had a conversation more than once, and they would say, thanks, miss. And then off we'd go to the next piece rather than me getting all over them and saying, you have to get rid of that person. We would have the conversation and I would act. I mean, I had a paraprofessional who said, what are you doing? I said, just go with me. And we did.
Stay with me.
Stay
Yeah.
with me. But we did.
Right.
And, but it's really just not being afraid.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't be afraid.
You got to be willing to be vulnerable, and you got to be
Right.
willing to struggle and,
Right.
and know that you're going to feel like you failed on certain days, and you just got to get back out there and keep doing it.
And if you look, I mean, it's just about loving kids, y'all.
Yeah.
And it's about loving kids. And if you became a special educator, you did it because you have a different set of genes. I'm just telling you.
Right.
Those genes are patience. Those genes are love for anyone and everyone. I don't care what your disability is. I just want to help you. And go with why you started that. Find your why and
Yeah.
stick with your why. That's what I would tell a new teacher. I mean, there's no magic. I'm going to tell everybody there's no magic.
No
Don't
magic.
think you're going to fix the world, but you are going to make a difference.
Yeah.
So
Coral, thank you so much for
You're
coming and
welcome.
hanging out with us today.
It was great.
I really loved it. Thank you so
Yes.
much for having me.
Awesome.
Okay.
To continue to elevate the conversation, hit us up on Twitter at SPEDTalk 2020, where you can find links to all of our episodes and each of the resources that we discussed today.
John, also links to the resources will be available at our podcast site.
And if you found these resources helpful, be sure to share them with a friend, because information should always flow through us, not to us.
That will do it for this episode of SPED Talk.
And remember, courage creates culture and kindness keeps us connected.
Until the next time, I'm Pam,
And I've been John.
and this is
SPED Talk.
Elevate the concept.
Living in the moment, and the moment is the future.
Speaking with Pam and John.